Have you ever noticed that somebody driving slower than you seems like an idiot, and anybody driving faster than you is a maniac? This amusing quote comes from the comedian George Carlin and makes the point that we are likely to believe that our preferences and beliefs reflect true reality, and that there is something wrong with those who act differently from us. Psychologists call this tendency naive realism. Naive realism is the tendency to believe that the way we see the world is the way that it truly exists, but this cannot possibly be true for everyone. If it were, people would always agree with one another. Instead, people commonly disagree. Because people consider their beliefs to be reasonable and accurate, they think that any reasonable person would agree with them. So someone who disagrees must be unreasonable and inaccurate. They either are poorly informed and need to have more information, they're not processing the information properly and need to have the information explained to them, or distorting influence like self-interest, personal connection, or political ideology is preventing them from learning about and properly understanding the information. Put differently, those who disagree with us must be either too lazy to get the right information, too stupid to process it properly, or somehow biased by a distorting influence. So what? What are the consequences of naive realism? Think back to a time you were chatting with a friend, a coworker, or a classmate, and you realize that you disagree on some key issue. How did it go? Commonly, these interactions start off with two people sharing information. Each side assumes that if they just share their information, they can convince the other that they're wrong. People explain their side, make good points, and expect to win. But usually sharing information doesn't change people's minds. People don't typically despair at this point. They assume the other hasn't understood, and they try to explain themselves better. They rephrase, simplify, and expand their views. And yet, despite this, they still don't change the other person's mind. It's at this point that political debates typically go quite poorly. Something psychologists call a conflict spiral begins. Voices get heated, people get upset, sometimes people start calling each other names or criticizing the other person's personality. This conflict escalation occurs, according to naive realism, because if we've established that this other is well informed and that they understand our information, then there must be something that is biasing their views. A distorting influence such as self-interest, ideology, or a flawed personality is preventing them from seeing things accurately. So what causes naive realism? Naive realism happens because our brain engages in a lot of work we aren't aware of. We think we see things as they are, but we aren't aware of our brain's hidden work, and therefore trust our perceptions as true reflections. Perceptual illusions demonstrate the hidden work our brain does quite well. Take this example called the checker shadow illusion. Which of the two squares, A or B, appears to be darker? Although you likely decided that square A is darker than square B, the two squares are actually the same shade, as you can see in this image here. Or take the moire image. In this image, the wheels in the periphery of our vision appear to move. However, in reality, they are completely stationary. If you focus your attention on just one circle, you'll notice it no longer appears to be moving. If you shift your focus to another circle, the stationary circle switches. Pause the video if you think this is part of the animations. Did you pause it? When you did, the image still appeared to be moving. Visual illusions demonstrate that we do not simply see things as they are, but because we don't realize that our view of the world is distorted, we assume that it is accurate. This causes us to think that those who disagree with us are the ones who see a distorted world. But what specifically do we think is wrong with these people? Well, there are a variety of ways we can explain how a person who has all the right information can disagree with us. But a common one is that we assume that they are biased by a strong and extreme political ideology. This tendency is called the false polarization effect. People assume that those who disagree with them are more extreme and ideological than those people really are. False polarization has been observed in many past studies. In a study we conducted here at McEwen, we asked people to indicate their stance on the political issue of capital punishment, and also to indicate their political ideology. That is, both opponents and supporters of capital punishment indicated whether they were very liberal, or very conservative, or somewhere in between. The ideologies of those who supported capital punishment are represented in blue, and those who opposed capital punishment are represented in yellow. As you can see, while opponents are more liberal than supporters, the actual gap in the ideology of opponents and supporters was quite small. We also asked people to guess the ideology of those who disagreed with them on this same scale. The results are displayed here. As you can see, people thought those who disagreed with them were more extreme than they really were. Supporters thought opponents were quite liberal, and opponents thought supporters were quite conservative. Below the video, we have displayed your results on the previous questionnaire in which you estimated the political views of those who disagree with you on two political issues. Alongside, We post the data we previously collected showing how extreme on the issues the people who disagree with you actually are. If your results are farther from the middle of the scale, farther from the number 5 than those people's actual results are, then you showed false polarization. Please briefly pause the video and review your results below. Did you show false polarization? If so, you have demonstrated that you are susceptible to naive realism. But don't worry, nearly everyone is. It is, in a way, a natural consequence of believing you are correct on an issue. If you think your view is correct, then you have to believe that those who disagree with you are incorrect. So what are the implications of this? What are the consequences of false polarization? When people think those who disagree with them are biased and extreme, they often don't just argue with them. They are now no longer interested in working with them and coming to compromises. Instead, they think that the best way to deal with extreme opponents is to use competitive or even conflict-escalating strategies such as ignoring them, trying to silence their voice, or arguing with them. In extreme cases, they may even advocate violence. So let's review. In this video, we taught you about the concept of naive realism, which is the tendency to believe that the way we see the world is the way the world truly exists. When applied to beliefs such as political beliefs, naive realism causes false polarization. People think those who disagree with them are biased, which causes them to think that their opponents are driven by extreme ideologies and beliefs. A consequence of false polarization is the tendency to argue or advocate conflict-escalating strategies over cooperations. Can we stop naive realism? In a way, no. We cannot stop our brain from engaging in its secret work. Although we cannot stop our brain from acting like a brain, we can do something else. We could come to doubt the false sense of seeing things as they really are. Or, at least, we can stop ourselves from thinking that there is something wrong with those who disagree with us. Maybe they have different information or values, or maybe our information and values are affecting our own judgments. Knowing about naive realism isn't going to change what you believe to be true. These views are likely created by information you know which you consider vital, your sense of right and wrong, or by experiences and relationships that are important to you. But you probably also care about getting along with others, you likely want to live in a world with as little conflict as possible, and you also care about understanding people accurately. We hope that with this understanding of naive realism that you will have more accurate insight into why people disagree with you, and that you may be able to have more cordial disagreements in the future.